This is Dr. Brent Collins. Date, March 18, 2032. Location, North Atlantic Monitoring Hub, Reykjavik. I don't know how long I'll be able to keep these journals. The grid's unstable across Europe, and the team's down to skeleton crews. But I need to get this recorded, if for nothing else, a kind of time-stamped memory of how it began to unravel. 2 weeks ago, we observed a sudden deviation in the North Atlantic deep-water formation metrics, a 34% reduction in flow rate, surpassing every previous modeled threshold. We thought it was a sensor fault. It wasn't. Then came the salinity plunge. Surface freshwater inputs from Greenland melt had reached a tipping point we'd long theorized about, but had underestimated the non-linear acceleration. The Atlantic Meridional Overturning circulation, the AMOC, began stalling. Not gradually, not with the grace we'd hoped nature would grant. It began breaking apart like an old machine stripped of oil and tension. The warm conveyor slowed. Subtropical waters pooled in chaotic gyres. Deep water formation buckled. And then, the inversion wave. That's what we're calling it. The model outputs look like a rogue wave in thermal transport. Energy displaced unevenly, folding into hemispheric pressure ridges. The implications. I still can't speak them aloud to the team without my voice catching. Northern Europe is already seeing the first atmospheric response. Last week, Oslo recorded mid-March highs at minus 22 degrees Celsius, snowpack deepening instead of retreating. Meanwhile, Dakar hit 49 degrees Celsius under stagnant skies, the Hadley cell expanding into latitudes we'd never dared imagine. The atmosphere is fracturing along these new gradients, and with the AMOC and partial stall, the buffering effect we relied on is gone. Storms in the mid-Atlantic are beginning to show extreme rotation patterns. Jet stream displacement is erratic, unpredictable. We're running new simulations every hour, but nature is moving faster than the models can adapt. The old rhythm of the Earth's breath, the great exhale of heat and inhale of cold across the oceans, is faltering. The Earth is developing an asymmetric pulse. One of the engineers, a stoic man named Lars, said this morning, "It's like the planet forgot how to breathe." That stays with me. More soon. I need to coordinate with the satellite array team. But the ionospheric noise is intensifying, making clean data difficult. End recording. Date, March 26, 2032. Location, North Atlantic Monitoring Hub, Reykjavik. This is Collins again. I can barely think straight. It's been 8 days since my last entry, though it feels like a lifetime. Sleep has become fragmented, fitful bursts between emergencies. The sea itself has changed. We've confirmed it now. The subpolar gyre has unmoored. Satellite altimetry showed it first. A massive off-axis bulge in sea surface height where it should not be. That data alone would have rattled us. But then the buoys began sending divergent vectors. The gyre is drifting southeast, deforming chaotically, pulling warm subtropical waters along for the ride. The Gulf Stream extension is no longer extending. It's spiraling in place off the coast of Newfoundland, a liquid eddy of lost energy. Europe's lifeline is fracturing. This morning, London awoke to snowfall dense enough to cripple rail and air networks. Temperatures are dropping by the hour. Central Europe faces a paradox, deepening cold even as the calendar edges toward April. Meanwhile, equatorial regions are cooking. The ITCZ, the Intertropical Convergence Zone, is widening, thickening, trapping vast pools of latent heat. The West African monsoon is destabilized. Tropical cyclone formation models are spiking. We're no longer observing climate. We're watching an organism in seizure. Atmospheric chemists on our team reported today that upper troposphere ozone levels are dropping over northern Europe. We suspect a collapse in the vertical mixing that would normally distribute key gases. The atmosphere itself is stratifying under the rogue gradients of heat and cold. It's an eerie thing, this new world. The sky looks different and almost too clear at times, then bruise-colored with dust the next. Winds feel wrong. Cold gusts descend beneath layers of hot, stagnant air. The sea smells metallic, heavy with algal blooms and oxygen-starved decay where currents have stalled. I walk the harbor this morning. The fishing fleet lies idle. The skippers gather in silence, watching the water as if it were a stranger. They know, even without the science, something fundamental has shifted. I keep thinking of that phrase Lars spoke. It's like the planet forgot how to breathe. The rogue current, we've begun calling it that. No longer the orderly pulse of AMOC, but a wild, erratic flow driven by chaotic feedbacks. We cannot model what comes next. We can only witness it. End recording. Date, April 3rd, 2032. Location, North Atlantic Monitoring Hub, Reykjavik. Dr. Brent Collins. Recording. I have to get this down before the next set of emergency briefings swallows the day. The jet stream has shattered. We've all been watching it. For weeks, the upper atmosphere patterns had begun contorting. But last night, the new satellite composites confirmed what we feared. The polar jet is no longer a coherent band. It's fragmented into looping Rossby wave anomalies of unprecedented amplitude. Some loops are dipping as far south as Morocco. Others are arching over Greenland in massive blocking ridges. Over the Pacific, new subtropical jets are emerging in strange tandem with the broken polar remnants. The atmosphere is bleeding its gradients in chaotic fits. The result is a patchwork planet of unseasonable extremes. Paris sits locked under a dome of Siberian air, streets glazed with ice. Meanwhile, Madrid swelters in desert heat, 37 degrees Celsius and rising. Parts of West Africa report deadly wet bulb temperatures exceeding human survivability for unprotected exposure. And the storms. A low-pressure system, seeded by the rogue gyre, and now fueled by heat differentials across the fractured jet stream, is approaching Ireland. The models show a cyclone with a core pressure more typical of a Category 2 Atlantic hurricane, but hybridized, cold core and warm core at once. An unnatural beast. The locals are calling it the Gray Spiral, a fitting name. We used to joke about weather weirding, a quaint phrase from decades past. There is nothing quaint about it now. Each region of this planet is slipping out of sync with the next. The climate engine, once self-correcting, buffered by the great conveyor and jet, is convulsing. There is no symmetry anymore. In the quiet moments, I find myself staring at the wind vector maps, not for analysis, but as though reading some cryptic language written by a mindless god. The patterns feel malignant. No other word fits. I stood on the observation deck at dawn. The North Atlantic shimmered beneath cloud breaks, unnatural streaks of blood red and pale blue across the water. The temperature differentials between surface patches are spiking. Thermal photography shows what our eyes cannot, eddies of trapped heat swirling like bruises across a dying ocean. This is the new world, an asymmetric planet, and we are unprepared. End recording. Date, April 12, 2032. Location, North Atlantic Monitoring Hub, Reykjavik. Brent Collins. Another entry, though I struggle with the words. What we are witnessing no longer feels like climate science. It feels like observation at the edges of planetary coherence. The spiral widens. In the Arctic, the great cold engine that once helped drive the very circulations now in collapse. We are seeing profound disruption. Satellite albedo readings show unprecedented darkening of the Greenland ice sheet. Snowfall is scant where it should be deep. Meltwater rivers have braided their way across vast expanses of ice far earlier than any previous melt season. At the same time, strange inversions are occurring. The Central Arctic Basin recorded an anomalous cold core, 41 degrees C in early April, trapped beneath layers of warmer air aloft. The atmospheric stratification is locking in pockets of deep freeze, even as surrounding zones warm chaotically. It is a planet of dissonance. On the U.S. eastern seaboard, the broken jet stream has spawned something new, a standing wave over the Atlantic seaboard. Coastal temperatures from Boston to Norfolk fluctuate wildly. 30 degrees one day, frost the next. The human systems there, agriculture, power grids, transportation, are beginning to buckle. I spoke to colleagues at MIT this morning. One of them said simply, "We are living in the in-between, a liminal state. Neither the old climate nor any stable new one." In South Asia, monsoon precursors have arrived months early, and with violent force. Reports from Kerala describe torrential rains falling in bands interspersed with crushing heat. Rivers have surged over banks, carving new channels through ancient cities. Meanwhile, the Himalayan snowpack is destabilized, locked beneath strange temperature inversions similar to those in the Arctic. When this cap breaks, the meltwater pulses could be catastrophic. We used to speak of feedback loops as abstract models. Now I see them as living agents, cascades of consequence rippling out across the globe. The rogue current has severed the Earth's symmetry. Each region now responds according to its own local chaos, no longer harmonized by the great atmospheric and oceanic rhythms we once depended on. And beneath it all, storms build, not in isolation, but as a chorus, driven by these new gradients. I fear what comes next. End recording. Date: April 19th, 2032. Location: North Atlantic Monitoring Hub, Reykjavik. Dr. Brent Collins. I record this with shaking hands. The tremor is not from fatigue, though there is that, but from what the Southern Hemisphere data revealed today. We have spent weeks focused on the Northern Hemisphere collapse, the broken jet, the rogue gyre, the Arctic inversion. But the planet is a coupled system. The South cannot remain immune, and now it is responding. The Southern Ocean gyres, long thought to be somewhat buffered from abrupt AMOC shifts, are pulsing erratically. A colleague in Hobart sent a distressing report. The Antarctic circumpolar current is displaying anomalous oscillations. In places, it is accelerating beyond known norms. In others, it stalls, forming quasi-stationary eddies that trap vast amounts of heat. Sea surface temperatures south of Madagascar are +6 degrees, above seasonal averages. The southern Indian Ocean is blooming with plankton in massive, ghostly spirals, visible even from space. But beneath this surface bloom lies oxygen-starved water, churning upward in chaotic upwelling events. The great southern engine, the global climate's thermal anchor, is groaning under the strain. And Antarctica. New radar passes over the West Antarctic ice sheet show vast subsurface melt layers, forming weeks ahead of model predictions. The Amundsen Sea embayment, in particular, is destabilizing. The loss of grounding ice there could soon unleash sea level pulses far beyond current projections. Meanwhile, here in Reykjavik, the air feels surreal, crisp, too still, as though held in suspension. At twilight, the sky takes on colors I struggle to describe. Violet bleeding into pale gold, with faint horizontal bands that flicker as though the atmosphere itself is uncertain how to scatter light. This is not poetic fancy. Atmospheric physicists are observing increased stratification and aerosol layering, a fractured vertical structure that refracts light in strange ways. It is as though the planet is becoming a hall of mirrors. Gradients within gradients, feedbacks within feedbacks. And now, reports arrive from Japan. Bizarre storm tracks forming over the Pacific, skirting the broken jet stream remnants. One system is moving westward across the central Pacific, an impossible track under old norms. We cannot predict where these storms will go. The models are obsolete. I looked at the latest composite world map before this recording. It resembles no Earth I have ever known. Bands of heat and cold wrapping the planet in broken ribbons, ocean currents spiraling off course, winds looping in impossible arcs. The Earth's circulatory system is unmade, and yet, life within it persists, for now. How long that holds, no one can say. End recording. Date: April 27th, 2032. Location: North Atlantic Monitoring Hub, Reykjavik. Dr. Brent Collins. Another grim entry, though I feel compelled to document as much as I can. The global asynchrony is deepening. No region remains untouched. I will begin with South America. The Amazon basin is entering a state we once theorized as a worst case, dieback mode. The altered Atlantic currents have choked the moisture conveyor feeding the Amazon's seasonal rains. Satellite imagery from this past week shows vast regions of the upper basin cloaked in smoke, uncontrolled fires consuming desiccated forest where rain should have fallen. At the same time, the southern tip of the continent, Patagonia, is in upheaval. Fueled by the now erratic westerlies and surging southern ocean heat, the region is experiencing a succession of unprecedented windstorms. Entire valleys have been stripped bare, ancient lenga forests twisted and shattered. In Buenos Aires, the Rio de la Plata has surged beyond its banks under the influence of inverted pressure gradients and storm-driven tides. Floodwaters pulse through the old city streets under skies heavy with yellow-gray haze. Australia next. The Great Barrier Reef, already fragile, is undergoing a mass bleaching event on a scale we could barely imagine. Ocean temperatures along the Queensland coast have exceeded critical thresholds for weeks. Vast swaths of coral now glow a spectral white beneath the sun. But it is inland where the horror truly unfolds. Central Australia is locked in a heat wave beyond recorded history. 51 degrees Celsius reported in Alice Springs. The Outback's red heart now shimmers under a sun that feels predatory. Atmospheric scientists there have observed strange vertical layering, hot air trapped beneath cooler stratospheric intrusions. The resulting atmospheric lensing has produced eerie visual effects. Distant objects refract and shimmer as though viewed through molten glass. Finally, the Middle East. Here the rogue current's disruption of global patterns has collided with the region's natural extremes. The result is terrifying. I received a personal message from a colleague in Kuwait City this morning. His words were blunt. We are reaching the edge of human endurance. Temperatures there have hovered near 50 degrees Celsius for days, with dew points pushing survivability limits. Infrastructure is beginning to fail. Power grids strain under ceaseless demand for cooling. Worse, anomalous storm cells, fed by Arabian Sea moisture now funneled erratically northward, have produced deluges across the desert. Flash floods have carved deep channels through cities and ancient wadis alike. We used to think of climate disruption as something that might gradually reshape the familiar. Now it seems intent on unmaking it entirely. The equator, once the engine of predictable planetary rhythms, is now fractured. Each region spins toward its own strange fate, no longer bound to any global synchrony. I fear we are witnessing not just an unstable climate, but an unstable Earth. End recording. Date, May 5th, 2032. Location, North Atlantic Monitoring Hub, Reykjavik. Brent Collins here. Sleep comes rarely now. The cycle of alerts, data updates, emergency calls, it is relentless. But more than that, the Earth itself feels tilted, as though the very sense of planetary rhythm has been lost. I have today's notes in front of me. They read like dispatches from separate alien worlds. I will begin with Africa. The continent's climate was always a tapestry of extremes, but now the threads are unraveling. The Sahel, long poised on the knife edge between desert and savanna, is collapsing inward. The altered Atlantic currents have shifted the West African monsoon's core southward and fragmented its flow. Entire villages in Mali and Niger report crop failures. Ancient patterns of life, herding, dryland farming, are crumbling beneath skies that refuse to follow the old rules. Yet further south, the Congo Basin faces the inverse, crushing humidity and torrential, erratic rains. The river itself has swollen beyond its banks in places unseen in living memory. Satellite data shows vast new wetlands forming, but they are unstable, choked with debris, breeding grounds for disease. The rainforest, too, struggles beneath this strange pulse. Heat-loving invasive species are advancing where canopy giants once ruled. Now, the North Pacific. There, the broken jet stream has allowed vast domes of high pressure to stagnate, heat domes unlike any previously observed. The waters off the Pacific Northwest now simmer several degrees above normal. The marine ecosystems are in freefall, mass fish die-offs, toxic algal blooms spreading like oil slicks. Off the coast of Japan, equally bizarre events unfold. Storm systems now travel erratically along the edges of these heat domes, looping, stalling, or accelerating in ways no model can predict. One such storm, Typhoon Ansei, has defied forecasting entirely, moving northwest into Russian waters in a strange, lurching path. And here, in Western Canada, reports arrive that echo the same eerie story. British Columbia's once reliable temperate rainforests are caught in a cruel whiplash. Sudden snowfalls followed by unseasonal heat. Rivers that should be frozen remain open. Those that should flow are choked with ice dams. In the Canadian Rockies, strange fogs now cling to the valleys, cold air trapped beneath unstable, overheated layers. Mountaineers describe the phenomenon as sky below and above, a mirrored world of disorientation. And the winds. Jet-induced pressure anomalies have triggered unprecedented Chinook-like events, warm winds rushing down slope with such force that forest floors steam beneath sudden snowmelt. I have stood on this same earth my whole life, but now I scarcely recognize it. The rogue current has sundered the bonds between ocean, atmosphere, and land. We no longer live on a planet with coherent seasons or stable boundaries. We live on a tilted world, and the tilt grows steeper by the day. End recording. Date, May 13, 2032. Location, North Atlantic Monitoring Hub, Reykjavik. Brent Collins. There is a phrase that keeps echoing in my mind as I record these updates. The ghost margins. That is what many of us now call the zones where old climate boundaries, the edges of ice, the lines of desert, the predictable storm tracks, used to lie. Now, they shimmer and drift like ghosts across the planet. I will begin in the polar regions. The Arctic, already unmoored, is entering uncharted territory. The Beaufort Gyre, a massive circular current north of Canada, is weakening, its freshwater cap destabilized. The result, pulses of frigid, freshened water are now spilling into the North Atlantic, compounding the rogue current's chaos. Simultaneously, the central Arctic sea ice is thinner and more mobile than ever recorded. Vast leads, cracks in the ice, have opened weeks ahead of schedule. The ice flows are drifting erratically, driven by fractured wind patterns. Beneath them, anomalous warm currents rise, a hidden fire beneath the ghostly ice. In eastern Russia, Siberia, the land itself seems to groan under the new regime. Permafrost collapse is accelerating. Entire swaths of tundra are subsiding, pocked with thermokarst lakes that bubble methane into the thickening atmosphere. But it is the skies that trouble me most. Atmospheric monitors in Yakutsk report persistent polar stratospheric clouds, nacreous clouds of eerie, shifting color, forming at latitudes and times they should not. They shimmer in mother-of-pearl hues at dawn and dusk, beautiful and deeply unnatural. And then there is the Mediterranean, the so-called cradle of climate civilization. Here, the sea itself is betraying its old rhythms. The disrupted Atlantic inflow has altered salinity balances, triggering chaotic convection. Sea surface temperatures now vary wildly across short distances. A colleague in Athens described it bluntly. The sea boils and chills in patches like a sick animal. The land fares no better. The fractured jet and subtropical shifts have produced a string of hyper-intense Mediterranean cyclones, metacanes, that strike with little warning. One such storm recently battered Sicily, flooding ancient streets with walls of water beneath blood-red skies laden with Saharan dust. And across the region, a creeping dread spreads. Vineyards wither beneath erratic heat spikes. Olive groves stand ghostly and leafless. The air itself feels unstable, thick, heavy, tinged with unfamiliar scents carried by winds from fractured distant systems. All of this speaks to a deeper truth. the boundaries of Earth's climate have dissolved. The margins, those edges that defined life's patterns, are now fluid, shifting, spectral. We are entering a planetary phase where the very concept of climate zones may no longer apply. A ghost planet, familiar in shape, but unbound in behavior. And each new dawn brings another fracture. End recording. Date, May 21st, 2032. Location, North Atlantic Monitoring Hub, Reykjavik. Dr. Brent Collins reporting. It becomes harder to speak these days, not from fatigue alone, but from the enormity of what we now witness. I have just finished reviewing new reports on deep ocean dynamics. They confirm what many of us feared. The collapse of surface patterns is now cascading into the abyss. Autonomous deep diving floats across the Atlantic and Southern Ocean now transmit alarming data. Oxygen minimum zones are expanding rapidly, breathless depths spreading like slow, invisible wildfires. In the North Atlantic, ancient cold deep-water layers, once rich with oxygen and nutrients, are stagnating beneath disrupted thermohaline flows. The rogue current's chaotic pulses now send erratic downwellings and standing eddies into the deep ocean. These trapped layers become heat-choked and oxygen-starved, suffocating life. Marine ecologists report mass die-offs of deep pelagic species, lanternfish, squid, and strange gelatinous organisms that once thrived in the twilight zone. Even the abyssal plains, the planet's great sedimentary archives, are stirring. Instruments detect faint vibrations in sediment resuspension as gas hydrates destabilize along continental slopes. Methane plumes rise slowly from ancient deposits, spectral columns of bubbles twisting toward a sea surface already choked with change. And now, Central Asia. Here, in the great continental heartland, the new climate asymmetry manifests brutally. The Caspian Sea, long buffered by regional inflows, is plummeting. Disrupted precipitation patterns and soaring evaporation rates now shrink its surface visibly month to month. Vast salt flats gleam where water once shimmered. In Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, the desiccation of steppe and desert margins is accelerating. Ancient caravan routes, once marginally habitable, now lie beneath storms of blinding alkaline dust. Satellite data shows towering dust plumes spiraling eastward, carried by fractured jet stream remnants into China's western provinces. There, in the Tarim Basin, a new desert expands. Entire orchards and villages vanish beneath slow-moving waves of sand. And across the region, an eerie silence spreads. Birds vanish. Insects fall quiet. A stillness not born of winter, but of ecological collapse. Lastly, the Atlantic seaboard of the U.S. The broken Gulf Stream, now a rogue spiral, no longer stabilizes this coast. The eastern seaboard's weather has become a fever dream. Washington, D.C. and New York lurch between spring-like warmth and sudden deep chills. Within days, the ocean itself surges against the coast with strange tides, driven by offshore pressure anomalies. And the storms, a new class of hybrid cyclones, now forms in the warm chord eddies birthed by the rogue current. These monsters defy traditional classification, part tropical, part extratropical, drawing energy from the sea's fractured gradients. Just days ago, one such system, Cyclone Helena, battered the Carolinas, carrying snow in its outer bands and searing heat in its eye wall. The storm left a coastline scarred, not just by wind and water, but by the cognitive dissonance of experiencing all seasons in a single event. I stare at the data, but it is the patterns of absence that haunt me most. Oxygen missing from the depths, water missing from ancient seas, life missing from long, stable ecosystems. This is an unraveling not just of climate, but of the memory of climate itself. We inhabit a planet adrift, its ancient breaths faltering in both sea and sky, and no one knows how deep this collapse will go. End recording. Date, May 29, 2032. Location: North Atlantic Monitoring Hub, Reykjavik. Brent Collins. The air itself is unmaking. I use the word carefully. This is not merely a poetic notion. The chemical architecture of our atmosphere is beginning to break down under the weight of asymmetric climate feedbacks. This week's upper atmosphere data from multiple sites reveals disturbing trends. Ozone concentrations over mid-latitudes are falling, not from anthropogenic emissions this time, but from stratospheric turbulence. Sudden stratospheric warming events, driven by fractured polar dynamics, are disrupting the delicate balance of catalytic reactions. In parallel, volatile organic compounds from vast northern fires now penetrate the upper troposphere, feeding reactions that generate dense bands of ozone and smog, but in the wrong places and in wrong seasons. The result: a world of fractured air. Across parts of Western Europe, ultraviolet radiation levels spike unpredictably beneath gaps in the ozone. In southern Spain and Italy, farmers report scorched crops beneath cloudless skies, ultraviolet burns where clouds once shielded the land. Meanwhile, in northern latitudes, dense surface ozone events now linger beneath inversion layers, choking cities in acrid, toxic air that refuses to disperse. I have stared at the atmospheric chemistry models, but they now resemble an abstract art of chaos: loops, eddies, impossible pathways of gas exchange. We are breathing an unfamiliar planet. Now, the equatorial Pacific. Here, the heartbeat of global ocean-atmosphere coupling, the El Niño Southern Oscillation, has been thrown into violent disarray. The warm pool of the Western Pacific has fragmented under the shifting trade winds. Instead of a coherent El Niño or La Niña phase, we observe wild swings in surface temperatures. Oceanic seesaws that drive unprecedented rainfall and drought patterns across the tropics. Vanuatu reports torrential rains, unlike any in recorded history, entire hillsides washed to sea. Meanwhile, in parts of Peru and Ecuador, the Pacific lies eerily still, dead calm beneath a burning sky. Fishermen speak of the ocean gone quiet. Oxygen-depleted upwellings now suffocate marine life that once thrived in these nutrient-rich waters. The planet's great heat engine is stalling and surging in maddening pulses. And here, Western Europe, the deep freeze holds. Driven by the fractured jet and blocked warm currents, a brutal Arctic flow continues to lock much of Western Europe beneath winter's grip. In June, snow lies heavy in the Alps and Pyrenees. London's parks bloom with frost flowers at dawn. Crops fail beneath this false winter. And yet, stray tendrils of Saharan air occasionally invade these frozen domains. The result? Surreal alternations of snow and dust, frost and dry heat, sometimes within a single day. A colleague in Geneva sent an image: an alpine meadow buried in snow, dusted with a thin layer of ochre sand blown northward, a palette of pale white and blood orange beneath a copper sky. This is no longer weather. This is an Earth whose feedbacks now war with themselves, layer upon layer, a spiraling collapse of once harmonious systems. And we, can only witness, record, and hope. But hope grows harder with each breath of this unmade air. End recording. Date: June 6, 2032. Location: North Atlantic Monitoring Hub, Reykjavik. Brent Collins. The fractures in Earth systems now extend beyond atmosphere and ocean. They are cutting through the web of life itself. Across the globe, we see it. Ecological collapse zones widening like open wounds. I read the latest biosphere synthesis reports last night. I could barely sleep afterward. In the Amazon, canopy mortality is accelerating. The weakened monsoon and relentless fires have left vast tracts of standing dead trees. Whole ecosystems vanish beneath expanding drought. The Great Barrier Reef, now largely skeletal. Fish populations have plummeted. Bleached coral fields stretch into the horizon beneath clouded waters. North American boreal forests face a double siege. Deep freeze events followed by sudden heat waves trigger mass tree mortality. The forests fall silent. No birds, no insects. A stillness that chills the soul. And beneath the Southern Ocean, the abyss grows stranger still. Here, vast cold currents once flowed with stately power, carrying oxygen and nutrients across the world's deep. Now, data from new ultra-deep floats reveals an unsettling picture. Large zones of the abyssal plains are falling into hypoxia. Life adapted to darkness and cold. Brittle stars, sea cucumbers, ancient corals, now suffocates beneath sluggish waters. Sediment plumes, normally stable for centuries, now stir in eerie rolling waves across the deep seabed. In some zones, strange bioluminescent displays bloom, vast clouds of glowing plankton and gelatinous life rising toward the surface as if fleeing the dying depths. It is as though the ocean itself seeks to expel its ancient memory of balance. And now, humanity begins to move. I speak of exodus lines, new chaotic patterns of migration erupting across a planet, losing its climatic bearings. In West Africa, entire communities move southward as the Sahel dries and cracks. Forest villages now receive caravans of climate refugees, swelling beyond capacity. From the eastern Mediterranean, waves of people flow northward, seeking respite from unendurable heat and erratic storms. European borders strain and crack under the pressure of this new human tide. Within China, migration from western provinces accelerates as desertification spreads. Coastal cities swell even as rising seas lap at their edges. And in North America, the great internal shift has begun, from the parched southwest and storm-torn southeast toward the perceived safety of the northern states and Canadian provinces. But there are no safe havens, only less broken zones in an increasingly broken world. Here in Reykjavik, I see it already. Our small city swells with newcomers, climate migrants, infrastructure workers, scientific teams, all drawn north by the fading allure of relative stability. But beneath the midnight sun, the air tastes different. The sea looks wrong. Even here, the ghosts of the old earth whisper through the fractured winds. We are becoming a planet of wanderers, ecosystems, currents, and peoples alike, seeking refuge in a world where refuge may no longer exist. The rogue current did not merely unmake a circulation, it unmade an era, and we now drift through what comes next. End recording. Date: June 14th, 2032. Location: North Atlantic Monitoring Hub, Reykjavik. Brent Collins. Every morning now brings a moment of hesitation before I open the new data streams. A breath held, a silent hope for stability that never comes. This morning's satellite readings revealed something extraordinary and unsettling. The emergence of new atmospheric wave patterns that defy known climate models. We are witnessing the birth of what some call gravity wave rivers, vast pulsing bands of air pressure anomalies that now sweep across the upper troposphere and lower stratosphere. These rivers twist and spiral through fractured jet stream remnants, thin ribbons of compressed air alternating with bands of rarefied atmosphere. From space, they resemble flowing calligraphy across the planet's skin, beautiful, spectral, and deeply unnatural. And their effects below are profound. Sudden wind bursts flatten forests in localized zones. Entire storm systems are redirected or torn apart mid-formation. Pressure anomalies create temporary air domes, pockets where temperatures swing 20 degrees C within hours. These gravity wave rivers now circle the globe in erratic loops, sometimes triggering resonant feedbacks that amplify local extremes. We no longer speak of weather in the traditional sense. We speak of atmospheric wave states, a fluid, chaotic system searching in vain for equilibrium. And beneath it all, the North Atlantic's pulse fades. The rogue current, once a spiraling gyre of fractured strength, now shows signs of disintegration. Autonomous floats and altimetry data confirm it. Key sections of the Atlantic Meridional overturning circulation are stalling entirely. Deepwater formation off Greenland has slowed to near standstill. The ocean's great conveyor is no longer a continuous loop. It is a broken chain, cold blobs of water sinking sporadically, warm surface flows stuttering without guidance. The sea itself looks wrong. Strange surface textures ripple outward from pressure anomalies, while deep eddies upwell heat in uneven pulses. The North Atlantic is falling silent, and in response, humanity adapts in unsettling ways. Across the globe, a strange rise of climate enclaves is underway. In remote valleys, on isolated plateaus, and within fortified urban cores, groups of wealth and power are constructing islands of the unreal. Controlled microclimates shielded from the planet's spiraling chaos. I have seen the footage. Domed agri-villages in the Alps, maintaining artificial seasons beneath polymer shells. Floating hab complexes in the Norwegian fjords, fed by geothermal power and desalinated water. Vertical arcologies in Dubai and Singapore, sealed against the erratic external world. These enclaves grow as the outside world falters, but they are islands adrift in a widening sea of instability, and their rise brings new divisions, a planetary fracture not just of climate but of society. Here in Reykjavik, talk of such enclaves is whispered, but the resources are scarce. Most here still cling to the old ways, adapting where they can. But the pull is strong, the promise of control in a world losing coherence. I cannot shake the image, a planet broken into fragments, physical, chemical, social, spinning slowly through a deepening spiral of entropy. The rogue current unmade the sea, and now the air follows. And we, all of us, drift through the islands of the unreal, each seeking shelter from a storm without end. End recording. Date: June 23, 2032. Location: North Atlantic Monitoring Hub, Reykjavik. Brent Collins. It is strange to speak of days, weeks, or months anymore. The calendar persists, but the world it once described no longer aligns. We are entering the era of the seasonless Earth. Reports now flow from every continent. The collapse of seasonal cycles, once so foundational to life. In Europe, winter lingers into June, only to be shattered by brief, suffocating heat. Crops germinate, flower, and die in stuttering, unnatural phases. In North America, the great deciduous forests of the Northeast show chaotic phenology. Leaves flush early, wither, regrow in panicked bursts, triggered by erratic temperature waves. Bird migrations disintegrate. Ancient flyways now lead nowhere. Arrival points bloom or freeze at the wrong times. Entire species falter in this shattered rhythm. In Japan, cherry blossoms bloomed 3 times this year. First in February under a freak warmth surge, again in April, and again now, beneath skies of bruised purple and heat haze. The planet's biological clock is broken, and beneath the sea, oceanic heat pulses now beat an eerie new rhythm. The rogue current's disintegration has set off wave-like surges of thermal energy across the world's oceans. Autonomous floats and deep-sea sensors detect these pulses, massive, slow-moving bands of elevated temperature traveling through mid-water columns, destabilizing ecosystems in their wake. Marine biologists call them ghost tides. In the South Pacific, one such pulse triggered a mass coral bleaching wave weeks ahead of expected stress thresholds, as though the ocean itself now carries internal storms of heat. In the Indian Ocean, sardine and tuna schools vanish from traditional grounds, driven by these unseen thermal rivers. Sonar scans reveal strange aggregations of deep-water species gathering in newly formed eddies, drawn by gradients they have never known. And as species shift, new biogeographies rise, eerie and unstable. In the Mediterranean, tropical fish from the Red Sea now dominate coastal ecosystems, displacing ancient temperate species. Coral once limited to equatorial waters now attempts tenuous holds on the coasts of Greece and Italy. In the North Atlantic, warm water jellyfish blooms spread as far north as Iceland, vast, translucent fleets drifting through once cold waters. Along Norway's fjords, kelp forests collapse under erratic light and nutrient regimes. In their place, algal mats of alien composition, feeding microbial communities that shift the very chemistry of these ancient waters. The land mirrors this chaos. In parts of the Canadian boreal forest, temperate shrubs now creep northward, accompanied by insects and diseases with them. Yet in the same regions, frost events still strike unpredictably, leaving whole waves of new growth dead and blackened. It is a planet of false frontiers. No biome holds steady. No seasonal contract remains honored. Life reshapes itself frantically, but this is not adaptation. It is a scrambling improvisation upon a stage whose lights flicker wildly. And beneath it all, the pulse of the ocean, ancient, once so steady, now stutters in fractured beats. I fear we are watching not just a climate collapse, but a profound reordering of life's very map upon this earth. And there is no guide for what comes next. End recording. Date: June 30th, 2032. Location: North Atlantic Monitoring Hub, Reykjavik. Brent Collins. The data no longer surprises me, but the human mind does. We speak often of planetary collapse, of systems unraveling, but we rarely speak of what happens when the collective psyche of a civilization meets the abyss. And now we see it. The psychological toll deepens. Around Reykjavik, I see it in the eyes of my colleagues, a flicker of disorientation, of quiet dread that grows harder to mask. Across Europe, reports of climate trauma surge. Sleep disorders, derealization, waves of anxiety linked not to imagined fears, but to the daily, undeniable breakdown of the world's rhythms. Children born in these months will never know true seasons. Their first memories will be of a planet in flux. In parts of Asia and North America, a new term circulates: sky sickness, a syndrome of vertigo, mood swings, and cognitive strain triggered by the fractured visual and sensory cues of an atmosphere in collapse. For when the sky itself no longer holds its contract, when light, color, and cloud cease to obey familiar patterns, the mind falters. And so, as the air and sea spiral, so do we. In response, desperate minds turn to desperate solutions. The first true planetary intervention attempts have begun. This month, a coalition of geoengineering groups launched high-altitude stratospheric aerosol dispersals, an effort to reflect incoming solar radiation and blunt the thermal feedbacks. I have reviewed the data. The results are ambiguous, perhaps dangerous. Temporary cooling pulses are observed in localized zones, but the fractured jet streams and gravity wave rivers twist these effects unpredictably. In some regions, temperature gradients intensify, spawning new atmospheric instabilities. In others, precipitation patterns collapse further. It is as though the planet now rejects simple interventions, its dynamics too nonlinear, too deep in the spiral for surface layer corrections. Yet the efforts continue, driven by the human need to act, even in the face of unknowing. And above it all, the sky reveals new mysteries. Across multiple latitudes, we now observe the emergence of new atmospheric structures, towering cloud bands and laminar flows unknown in pre-collapse climatology. Some appear as vast, river-like streams of condensate, kilometers wide, hundreds of kilometers long, coursing through the upper troposphere. Others manifest as shimmering, lens-shaped wave clouds stacked in impossible vertical chains, a visual echo of the gravity wave rivers aloft. At night, these structures glow faintly in the high atmosphere, a phenomenon yet unexplained. We call them fractured sky bands, and to stand beneath them is to feel the ancient covenant between earth and sky undone. I stood beneath such a band 2 nights ago, a pale, flowing ribbon stretched across the midnight blue, shifting and pulsing with silent light. It was beautiful. It was wrong. The planet's breath now carries new patterns, emergent, uncanny, beyond our models. We are entering not just a new climate, but a new phase of atmospheric being. And beneath it, humanity strains to adapt, to intervene, to understand, even as the spiral tightens. I record this with a trembling heart. The fractured sky watches us now. End recording. Date: July 9th, 2032. Location: North Atlantic Monitoring Hub, Reykjavik. Brent Collins. This may be my final recording, not because I will stop observing, but because words no longer seem enough. Yet something must be said, for the record, for the future, if it comes. The great spiral of collapse now moves into a strange phase, not of resolution, but of tenuous repatterning. Across the world, stabilization attempts continue, strange, fragmented efforts born of desperation and necessity. The stratospheric aerosols continue, though their impacts remain deeply uncertain. In some regions, adaptive local interventions show more promise. Cloud seeding over parched zones to trigger artificial rains, ocean surface brightening experiments, reflective particles dispersed across dead gyre centers, urban-scale weather control domes, crude localized climates forged in glass and steel. These are not solutions. They are triage, attempts to carve small islands of habitability from the chaotic whole. And yet, life adapts. Humanity adapts. In the north, new agricultural systems emerge, vertical farms, fungal substrates, rapid cycle crops bred for flux. In the cities, ancient rhythms of life give way to new temporal patterns, work shifts that follow the fractured cycles of light and temperature. Migratory corridors now weave the continents, carrying species and people alike along the planet's new, dynamic pathways. No ecosystem is static, no biome holds. But amidst this flux, a quiet pulse emerges, not the old pulse of Earth's great systems, but something new, tentative, searching. In the deep oceans, the first hints of new microbial ecosystems bloom within the strange thermal rivers. In the high atmosphere, persistent mesospheric structures begin to show subtle self-organizing behaviors, thin bands that pulse with a rhythm no model predicted. In the forests, hybrid plant communities rise, old species interwoven with new migrants in unstable, transient mosaics. And beneath the human world, a new psychological ecology forms. In place of despair, a strange resilience. In place of certainty, a deeper awareness of fragility and of flow. I walked the harbor this morning. The sea was still, unnaturally so, beneath a pale, fractured sky. Yet along the docks, people worked. Children played beneath shimmering sky bands. The air carried scents of both decay and growth. It is not a world of hope, nor of doom. It is a world of becoming. Raw, uncertain, alive in ways we have yet to understand. The rogue current unmade the old earth. What rises now remains a mystery. But we are here. We breathe. We adapt. And in this strange, broken, beautiful world, the pulse continues. Quiet, searching, unresolved. I leave this final record with no grand conclusion. Only this. The spiral turns. We turn with it. End recording.